Okay, let's get started. Sorry, my thought process went off the rails before I even started. Okay, are there any questions about anything we've done well, not last week, but the week before, or uh, anything that we've done up to this point? Okay. Again, I apologize for the late cancellation last week. Everything is fine, thanks to those of you who asked. Um, so today we're going to do survey flow. Next week, we will be doing distributing your survey. The following week is Thanksgiving, and so November 30th will be our last class. And that's when we'll be doing looking at your data and downloading it and doing a little bit of reporting in Qualtrics itself. So today we're doing survey flow, and you can do a lot of cool things with survey flow. I have here I just pulled a few blocks from the Qualtrics library. It's just some of their demographic question blocks. The exact questions and how they're set up are really not important for today's class anyhow. And you can see the survey gets kind of long. You can collapse these blocks to make it easier as you're going through creating your survey. And so to get the survey flow, you come over here to the survey flow icon. And here you see all the blocks that you've created. And you can see where naming your blocks can be very useful, especially if you have a lot more. Otherwise, Qualtrics will just name them. There'll be default block and then block 1, block 2, block 3, which really doesn't help you a lot. You can click here. It doesn't really look like a link. And you can see what questions. Don't see the whole thing, but this will give you a better idea of what's in the block. The other thing I want to show you, and this will be a little more apparent when we do our data later on, is this show flow IDs. And if you see now, there's this little ID that comes up in the corner. And so every element, every block will have this ID. And if you're going to do randomization of your blocks, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, it's important to have these and to test your survey and have it download the block IDs, which we'll see when we do the data. That way you can make sure that it's being randomized the way you want it to be. Sometimes these the survey flow page can get pretty crowded, and you just zoom in, zoom out as big as possible. Okay, can everybody see these well enough? You need to make it a little bit bigger. Okay. So you can see, there's add below. We're going to look at this in a second. There's move. You just put the cursor on it, and then you can drag and drop it to wherever you need to. Duplicate is exactly that. It duplicates the block. And then, of course, delete deletes the block. And one thing that's nice about Qualtrics is it always asks if you really want to do that. So the main thing with survey flow is, it says add new element here and then add below. It actually does the same thing. You get this, I guess, other block to decide what you want to add. And you can add another block in here. There's branch, which we're going to look at in a couple of minutes. Embedded data we'll talk about because that's very useful. Randomizer to randomize the blocks, just like we've looked at randomizing questions and randomizing responses. Web service we're not going to go into a lot because not too many people use it. This is if you want to pull in information from another website that allows you to do that. So it might be you want to bring in today's stock prices or today's weather or any number of other things that could change without necessarily knowing and then having to go in and mess with your survey to update it. The help through Qualtrics for this is pretty good. So if you need to go do this, look at the help. If you still need help, you know where to find me. Text sentiment, this is a very new type of element you can put in. This is if you're going to be using the text analysis portion of the data and reporting that Qualtrics has. You need to set this up before you do that. The text analysis is pretty rudimentary. It's good if you have some open-ended responses and you want to maybe send out an email or some kind of alert if there's going to be certain phrases that you're looking for. Let's say you're doing an abuse or a drug abuse hotline type of thing, and you're looking for specific phrases in there that you want to alert social workers or whoever right away. You can do that with the text sentiment. If you need to do honest to goodness text analysis or qualitative analysis, I would not recommend using Qualtrics to do that. Download your data and put it into Atlas TI, NVivo, or something that's really made to do that. Group we're going to look at in a second. The authenticator. This can be useful if you want to make sure that only certain people, say people with a Syracuse Net ID, you can use the university's single sign-on to do that. Again, there are good instructions at Qualtrics. I also have a help sheet on my Qualtrics page about using this as well, because you can capture a little bit of information from the SSO as well. You can also do it using a contact list. That's not quite as secure, but if you have a specific set of people, it might be useful. and reference survey. This is a survey that you have in your library, and it's your own, one of your own libraries that you or surveys that you marked for this kind of purpose. As we saw in the first couple of classes, when you first start a survey, it gives you the option of starting with one that you already have, or pulling in questions from one that you already have. When you do that, it pulls those questions and blocks and whatever into your survey, and then you can go ahead and edit them as you need for that particular survey. If you have several surveys and you want them all to use, say, the same demographic questions, you can make those demographic questions into a survey, and then put in this element wherever it makes sense within your survey. And what Qualtrics does now is, instead of copying it to this survey, as your respondents come to the survey, Qualtrics will, on the fly, pull it in and insert it into the survey as they're doing it. The advantage to that is, as I say, if you have several surveys using the same thing, if you need to make a change, you can just make that change in the reference survey, and it gets propagated out to all the other surveys using this one. Whereas if you import the survey, as we looked at in the beginning, now you have to go into each of those surveys and make the same change, which can introduce some errors. If you forget to do one of the surveys, or if you make a little mistake in some of them, then maybe that one survey is not like the other ones. So as I say, this is good if you have several concurrent surveys and want to use the same set of questions. Are there any questions so far? Now we'll go into the other elements in more detail. Group, that does exactly what you might think it does. You can group all of your elements, and now as you move things around, it will move all of it. I'm going to see this is a little bit more useful when you start having a lot of branches and maybe doing randomization. As we get further along, I'll show you how this is useful if you're doing an experimental design in your survey. Again, you can rename it, and that will make your life a lot easier. Then you'll see what the different groups are. One thing is, I have this element highlighted, and it shows all the other elements that are part of it. And you'll see that again in the branch and the randomization. The other thing you gotta be careful of is, let's say, oh, I didn't want to do a group. If you click here, it says, do you want to remove this element as well as the one item it contains? Meaning it will delete the group element, but it's also going to delete this block as well. So we're going to say no, because we still want that block. You just move it out. And now you can delete this. And you're good. embedded data. This can be immensely useful. And this is just, it works just like the piped data or piped text that we looked at. You can pull in survey metadata, first name, all kinds of stuff. Add information from a contact list that you might be using. Or existing embedded data, which means embedded data that you've already created up above. One thing about can you get it back if you remove it? You mean like the group element?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, yes, if you added a group and then you delete it, is there an undo button?
No,
Okay,
there
so you
isn't.
would have to do it over again.
Yeah, well, there kind of is a an undo, but it's revert. And if you've made a lot of changes in this before you need to get that back, it will revert back to when you started.
So
So
you
all
can
of those,
revert a couple of times until you get back to what you want.
see, like if I hit revert right now,
Right.
boom, everything disappears. Since I did stuff and did not, so I'm
Oh,
just
just
gonna,
at the beginning.
yeah, I'm just gonna put that in and now click apply. And I'm just gonna put in another. Now, if I say revert, it goes back to where the last time I hit apply is. So my suggestion is when you're working in survey flow, click apply. Unfortunately, it's not like the survey builder where it automatically saves, like every, couple of minutes. So, as I say, if I had done a lot of work here and didn't click apply, if I click that revert, then I lose all that work that I just did, and there's no way to get that back, unfortunately. Amy says you can save backups of your survey by making a copy and archiving the copy. Yes, you can do that. Come back to the survey builder because Qualtrics also has version control. And you can look at the version history and go back, so it's 321, 319, 206. Then from a couple of days ago and even before that. So, you can always get back to a previous version that you did, a little while ago. When you have, when you finalize your survey and you're ready to send it out, creating a backup and saving that someplace by exporting the survey, that can be a good idea. Okay, we're on embedded data. And you can also create your own, I guess, embedded data fields. when you download your data, this will be a column in Excel or a variable in SPSS. And then you can go to set a value. And here's where you see from pipe text that we've seen a couple of times. You pull it from a survey question. Of course, the survey question has to have already been asked for this to work. If you try to pull it from a question that has not been asked yet, then that embedded data field will be blank, even after they actually answered the question. Another embedded data field, we've seen all of these already. And see these, we've seen this kind of code in here. And you can see why you need to do mathematical things with it, why I recommend doing it in Word or a notepad, anything like that, because trying to see all of this gets to be, and working in this tiny little this little box here gets to be difficult. You could add as many fields as you want. What I also want to show you over here is, I'm going to click on this one so we know, is the variable type. And this applies more to working within Qualtrics than if you download the data and put it into Excel or SPSS. As we'll see in the last class, Qualtrics has reporting features, charts and graphs and tables and whatnot. And so you need to tell it what type of data it might be. These sets are for, kind of like check all that apply types of questions. Most of the time you wouldn't need to use these. But what you will use is either number, text, or date. So if you want to be able to make say a line graph with date as the axis, you need to tell Qualtrics that this embedded data is a date, so it knows to go ahead and use it and process it as a date rather than just some other text or string. Again, if you're going to do any of the analyzed text analysis in Qualtrics, you have to say that you want to be able to do that. You can also set it to a static value. We'll see that when we look at a couple of experimental designs we're just going to show you later on. So these embedded data are really very useful. We can still, as we saw in previous classes, use these in the piped text within a question if you've already set it. You can also use this for doing branching, which we're going to look at now. This is also very useful. Branch will not be triggered until you add a condition. And we've seen this kind of thing before. You can base it on a question. You can base it on embedded data. What type of computer the respondent is using, quota information, their IP location, and whether it's a true false type of question. We'll select question and let's just say, do you consent? Yes is selected. And like I said, we've seen this before. You can add levels to it, just like we've seen before in some of the logic things that we've done. So now, I'm going to move this up here. There. So the default block is, do you consent to answer this survey? If they say yes, then this branch gets activated, kicks in, however you want to call it. And any elements that are underneath this will be shown to that respondent. If they had selected no or maybe, they will not see this block. They'll go straight down to this one and continue on. The people who are shown this block will also continue down through these. So if you want something for where people say no, to make a special specific branch and block for that. So people are asked, you consent. If they say yes, they'll see this block. If they say no, they will see this one instead. And then everybody will see this block here. Are there any questions about that? And you can nest the branches as much as you might need to. Again, as I've said before, if you're doing a lot of that nesting, save everything, go get a cup of coffee and come back and think about it. You want to make sure that this is simple enough that it's actually going to work without having to figure out where the glitch might be. And you can even put other types of elements, embedded data. Another thing to put under there might be a custom end of survey. Say that, and then click on customize. You have all kinds of options. You gotta click override survey options, and then there's the default end of survey message. You can create a custom end of survey message. The end of survey message is exactly what it sounds like. It's the message that's displayed on the web page when the respondent is done with the survey. You can create as many as you want and pull them from your library. A common one as well is redirect to a URL. And when you do the sign-in survey to come to this class, That's what I have here. You sign in, and then it redirects you to the Zoom link. This can be useful if you're using an anonymous link to distribute your survey, but you want to be able to ask people if you can contact them later. You need to be able to keep that contact information separate from the main survey. Well, what you do is you create another short survey that just asks them their contact information. And then if they say, yes, I'm willing, you do a branch, and it goes to the redirect, goes to that contact survey. And send additional thank you emails. You don't want to increment your quota. You show the user response summary. You show before completing the survey. That's like when you get to the very end. Do not record any personal information and remove panel association. Not recommended. That is if you have a really sensitive, if you're sending it out using a directory, which used to be called a panel and used to be called a contact list. They're all three are the same thing. By default, and we'll see this more next week, any information that you have about the person in your contact list will be automatically added to the data, to their responses. And you may not want that, even though you know who it's being sent out to. You want to keep the responses completely anonymous, and then you can click there. Or do not record survey response, not recommended. And that's, yeah. So if the person says, no, I don't want to, I don't consent, you want to keep that. Sometimes you might, be tempted to say, don't record it because, if they're not doing it, why have that information? But you want to keep that information. I never recommend allowing Qualtrics or really any other program to decide for you what to keep and what not to keep. Have it keep everything, and then you decide later on what you want to keep. Click OK. And so now we can move this, say, up here. And we could do a different end of survey, and they can be sent to a different URL or get a different end of survey message, etc. The other thing that could be, let you do some really cool stuff. You can tell how much of a nerd I am. Is the randomizer. We've looked at randomizing questions and randomizing responses. Well, now you can also randomize all the blocks in your survey. It says even, randomly present 0 of the following elements. There's no elements underneath it. So I'm just going to put in a couple of dummy blocks like this, and you can see it automatically incremented this. You can show both of them, and what will happen as you're respondent comes in and gets to the randomizer element, these will be shown in a random order, these two blocks for each respondent. Or you can just say one, and it will show one or the other to each of the respondents. I mentioned in some of the, when we talked about the other randomization, this evenly present elements. Really, you pretty much always want to click that. And that just makes sure that each of the elements within this randomizer gets shown to your respondents the same number of times. So if you have 100 respondents, this one will be shown to 50, and this one will be shown to 50. Whereas if you don't have that, this might get shown to 60, and this one to 40. And that can mess up the results. You really always want it evenly presented. And of course, with edit count, each time you test this and you go through your data, you need to remember to come and reset all counts. Because Qualtrics will keep incrementing these as it's shown to your respondents, or even when you're just creating test data. And if it's not even, if there's something weird going on, it will propagate that. It won't clear its memory. So you need to reset all counts each time you test it. And then especially you need to reset all counts right before you distribute your survey. Because otherwise it will go from whatever is in here to the rest of your respondents, and that can be disastrous. And sometimes you won't notice that until your survey is done, downloaded your data. And again, of course, you can mix and match all of these. So you can have a randomizer within a branch. You can have a branch within a randomizer. Same with end of survey. There's no rule that says you can't have an end of survey under a randomizer. Don't know when you might do that, but you can. As I mentioned, really the only quote unquote rule is any embedded data that's based on a question. You have to put this element after that question, or those questions have been asked. Are there any questions? Click apply here. And I'm going to show you. Here's a experimental design type survey. And you can see I've named the blocks. It's a basic 2x2 experimental design. And so respondents will be shown one of these blocks with this text and this question, and then all respondents are shown this last one. So we have the consent block, instructions, and then the randomizer. You can see where I've used the group element here. Set the embedded data and then whatever questions are asked. This embedded data, as you can see, it's a static number, and this just sets the group variables that would need to do your analysis, your statistical analysis on these. So you can see there's group and name the groups just to make the looking at the survey flow easier. Somebody is asking, how can you see the results? Which section was displayed to a given respondent if one used randomization? That is where the show flow IDs. It looks like we might have a couple of minutes. I can run through this real quick. But you can see how, each respondent will come through and they'll be assigned to one of these groups. They'll get their group assigned, ask the basic questions, and then they come through and everybody gets the dependent question. So one more. See how you can get really fancy with this. So again, it's a 2x2. So each person comes in, they're assigned to one of these groups. And then they get their assigned, and then they get 3 questions. But since these questions are under this randomizer, each of those 3 questions are shown in a random order to each respondent within this group. You can see how using the group elements makes life a lot easier. You can see it keeps everything together, and how you can really nest things and work them out. Are there any questions? I'm going to turn on show flow IDs for this one. And go back to the survey builder. When you get to this one, we'll talk more about this. What's very useful, even if you're just doing a very basic, simple, not doing all this randomization and whatnot, just a basic survey. It's generate test responses. By default, it'll say 5, but usually you're going to want more than that. I'm going to say 100. There's additional options, allow unanswered questions, show verbose output. You don't need that. Additional URL parameters, you're really not going to need that either. But generate. Take a moment. Usually it's faster than this. The show verbose output would just make this stuff longer. You really don't, there's nothing important in any of this. Click close. Now we can go to data and analysis. Already did data in here. See, there's a lot of responses in there. But what I want to show, export data. And click on more options. And there's a lot more options. See, these, we're going to go through these. I just want to show export viewing order for randomized surveys. If you're doing that kind of randomization, you definitely want to click that. And then you can click download. Can you see this Excel sheet? As you can see, and we'll be going through this more in the last class when we talk about our data, but in answer to questions, there's all these extra fields here. You see this FL5, DOFL. These correspond to the flow IDs that we saw. These IDs. And if there's a 1, that means that particular respondent saw that block. And then what you can do, and it's probably easier in something like SPSS, is you can make a table to show who's, how many people saw this block, how many people saw this one, etc. as you go through. And this is how you can check that your randomization worked properly. Because if you have, say, 5 blocks and you're showing them evenly and you have 500 respondents, then each of these blocks should have been shown 100 times. So that's why, at least when you're testing, once you're testing and you know this is okay, you don't necessarily need to download this part of the data with your real data. Of course, it doesn't hurt. You can always delete these columns or just ignore them later on. But once you know your randomization is working properly, it's not really necessary. This isn't something you would necessarily need to report in, if you're doing a journal article or your dissertation or anything else. You don't normally report this kind of thing. All right, I think we've gotten through everything. Are there any other questions? Okay, I will see everybody here next week on the 16th. The week after that is Thanksgiving. And then the week after that is the 30th, and that will be our last class. Okay? All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good week.